Hey guys, welcome to the channel. Recently here I had a issue with my rear tail lights on my 68 Chevelle, and basically what was happening, and it's been going on for a couple, 3 seasons now. It's been going on for a while. Uh, what was going on is I'd go out to an event with the car, and then later that evening I'd turn on the lights, and uh, somebody would tell me that one of my taillights was out. So what I would do is drive home and deal with the taillight problem when I got home. And when I get home, the taillight would be working. So it was really confusing. It was an intermittent thing that was kind of driving me crazy. It went on for a couple, 3 seasons. And during that whole time, I knew that my signal light switch was actually giving me some trouble. Basically what was happening was when I would signal to the right, that right side tail light would go out. However, the light that was always out when I'd leave an event was the left side tail light. So it was kind of a confusing thing. But every time I came home, the stupid thing would be working. And as you know, if you're trying to diagnose stuff and it's actually working, really hard to figure out what's going on. So what I did was at some point I changed the left side socket in the car, and I ran a separate ground. That's what this block wire is here. Ran a separate ground to the body, to the chassis of the car. And anytime you can do that, it's a really good idea. I'd done that some time ago, and everything seemed to be fine. And then once again, somebody would tell me my taillight was out. I'd get home again and it would be working. So last summer I changed the bulb. I thought maybe the bulb was acting up, so I changed the bulb, and once again it did it again. So I did know that my signal light switch was kind of hokey, and I wanted to deal with that, so I'd ordered one. And over the holidays here, I thought I'd take some time to actually swap that out. So I ordered a TW40, which is pretty much standard on a lot of these older cars. This is 68 Chevelle. I think they fit anything from 66 to 74-ish. There is a couple of subtle differences between the switches. The TW40 is a 9-wire switch. You can see here, this one here is a factory 8-wire switch, and there's a little missing terminal right here in the end. And that's for that 9th wire. And the 9th wire actually just powers up this little socket here. If you have a column shift car, this lights up the inside of the column and lights up your shift indicator at the top of the column. If you have a console shift car like mine is, then you do not require this, and this should be removed from the TRW or the TW40 switch. So that's actually bolted to the back side of the switch here. Now what I did, the mistake I made was try to install the switch with that socket in place, not knowing that it wouldn't fit in there, and I had a lot of trouble getting it in. And I figured I'd buggered up the switch, so I called up my buddy Calvin and zipped over to his place. He basically tested my new switch, and he tested one here that he had in inventory, and he lent it to me as a plan B. But he mentioned let's remove this switch, or this little socket here, so it's not in the way when you go to install it. So I did that, put it in the car, and I still had issues. Everything worked. Signal lights worked, the hazards worked, the brake lights worked, but I still had an issue with that left rear. Both filaments in the bulb were actually lit. So then I knew I could move to the back of the car. But first, what I did, just to make sure that the new switch wasn't an issue, is I plugged this guy in just to eliminate that. And it's still, the car did exactly the same thing. So I knew that the switch was eliminated from that whole issue. So what I did was I messed around with the socket, and I found a couple of hokey things going on inside of it. First off, I found out that it was wired incorrectly, so I had these wires reversed. That created a problem. And I also, with my meter, I found that the inside of the socket, something was going on. There was a little there was a ground issue on one of the poles. So it was intermittent, it was off and on. And what I did was, instead of messing with it anymore, I just went and got a brand new socket, installed it in the car, and I always solder and heat shrink my connections. Anywhere I work on a car, I always prefer to solder and heat shrink. This way, that's a solid connection, and if you heat shrink it, it's sealed from the elements. There's no moisture going to get in there. It's airtight. And keep in mind, this is all in the trunk, so you throw things in your trunk and stuff gets moved around, and that's not going to pull apart if it's soldered. So soldered my connections, heat shrunk them, and popped a new bulb in there, and everything works today. So I tested it about 16 times. Actually, it really helps if you can get somebody in the car. I got the wife out here. It's hard to see. The car's pretty close to the back of the garage. So if you can put somebody in the driver's seat and hit the brake and signal and hazards and taillights and headlights and all that stuff, then it makes it a lot easier. When you're standing back there, you could actually see what's going on. So yeah, I had actually 3 issues that were making that one taillight not work for me. And keep in mind, all the power that runs to the back of your car goes through these switches. So I knew mine was a problem, but I also had an issue with the socket. So if you're having taillight issues with your car, what I recommend you do is first go to the back of the car, make sure that this socket is nice and clean inside. If you can get one and run a separate ground to the body of the car, it helps. Make sure it's wired up properly, and you've got a good 1157 bulb in there. So that's where I would start. Start at the back of the car. Make sure your sockets on both sides, the bulbs, the connections, all that stuff. Let's face it, these cars, they get old, and that wire gets brittle, and it can give you trouble. So start with that. Start with the back of the car. Make sure everything's solid back there. And failing that, then it could very well be your signal light switch in the column. Just keep in mind, don't make the same mistake I did. If you have a console shift car, get rid of this guy. This guy's going to cause you a problem as far as getting that switch into the column. So remove that if you don't need it. But yeah, those 2 things. So make sure your back lights are working properly. Everything's solid back there. Failing that, all your power runs through this guy. So that's the next thing to look at. So, well, that's about it, guys. If you have any trouble with your taillights, that's the 2 things that I would try. And again, solder and heat shrink, it's really important. If you failing that, you can use a butt connector or a crimp connector, and they sell them now with heat shrink on the outside of them, so you can still, crimp it on and heat it up and seal that connection up really good. That really is. Otherwise, you're going to be going back. Don't twist wires on and use electrical tape. It's just going to create more problems in the future. So, anyway, that's it, guys. Hope that helps somebody out. Thanks very much.